welcome to the Festival of Storytellers. I thank everybody that's involved with this process because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers.
Experience is not about the publisher, it is about us, the authors.
Hello, welcome to our day 4 of talking about our book. We'll be doing it tomorrow again and next week. And I don't know about you folks, but I'm really enjoying this. My name is Carl Johnoff, and my pen name is Kurt Niemann. This is my wife, Shirley. She is my motivator, and she is the person that keeps me pretty much under control, sort of, anyway. And the book that I'm talking about today is Badge, well, let me see if I can get this done right. There it is, Badge 411. And you see down in the bottom, my pen name, Kurt Niemann. Okay, and as I've said before, that pen name is a consequence of me having a very close friend as a very small child whose name was Kurt. What I'm going to talk about today is what a probation officer does. And the first thing I want to get clear is I want to talk about the difference between a probation officer and a parole officer. Yesterday, I talked about the difference between jails and prisons, jails being local detention organizations run generally by sheriff's departments or by cities. And most of the inmates in jails are awaiting trial or they're awaiting sentencing. They're not, in other words, all of them are not convicted of any criminal offense at that time, unless they're actually. Henrietta says hello. Hi, welcome back, Henrietta. Prisons are state and federal run detention facilities that house convicted felony criminals so that they may be in the state or federal prison. Cassandra says, nice to see us. Boy, it's nice to be here, Cassandra. Thank you. So that if you're in a state or federal prison, you've been convicted of a felony offense as opposed to a misdemeanor, which is a lesser offense, if you will. Lesser meaning, among other things, that there was less damage done to the community and to others in your offense, and also the sentence is lower, generally up to a year maximum for a misdemeanor. 9 months to your last breath, possibly, on a felony in a prison. And what I want to suggest, just right off the top, is if you're interested in how the criminal justice system works, not in how everybody else on the street thinks it's supposed to work. Contact your jails, contact your local prison, and see if you can take a tour. They're going to have a date and they're going to have a time for you to take a tour if you want to do that. It's really something to see, and most all of you will be glad that you're not an inmate. In any event, a probation officer is an officer of the court, a law enforcement officer that works for the community as well as an offender on probation. The first thing that a probation officer is going to be involved in is called a pre-sentence hearing. I talked about this yesterday. In other words, the person is convicted of a felony offense, and then my job, because I am an officer of the court and I work for the presiding judge, I'm going to go out and study the event. I'm going to study the individual, the individual's family, the nature of the offense, the restitution issues, if any, just get the entire background. Then I make a recommendation to the court as to what I think the sentence should be. And of course, it's going to be within the confines of state law, or in the federal case, federal law, regarding that particular offense. So that a person who is convicted of stealing a car may not necessarily get a life sentence, okay? Unless this is about the 35th car they've stolen, in which case, yeah, you're kind of on your way out. If a person is placed on probation, it means that person can be sent to a prison system to serve time, but the court has allowed the individual to remain at least somewhat free, still in the community, based on good behavior, based on obeying the laws and just not getting into further trouble. Hello, Naomi.
She's interested in listening to your story.
Yes, thank you. Let me just divert for just a moment. A parole officer is not an officer of the court. He is generally a former prison corrections officer whose job on the streets now is to supervise people who are on parole. If you're on parole, it means that you've been allowed to leave the prison and live as a relatively free person based on, again, good and acceptable behavior, so that a probation officer works with people who have not yet been to prison but can go to prison if they continue to mess up. A parole officer is a person who works with offenders who have been to prison and are let out early based on good behavior, so that they're on parole, if you will. Okay. If a person is placed on probation by the court, then my job becomes supervisory. I in my case, depending on the kind of caseload I had, I could have had anywhere from 40 odd to 120 people found guilty of criminal offenses but placed on probation, and it's my job to supervise them and be in contact with them as often as I possibly can, and make sure that they're following all the rules. It's also my job because guess what? I serve the community. That's my primary function, is to keep the community safe and keep the community healthy, so that one of my jobs is going to be to secure employment, secure sometimes housing, do basically social work, social services with the individual. In doing that, I am also serving the community. I'm doing my best to help an individual who has promised to stay clean, okay? So that what I do is I work with the community, and I also cooperate with all the other kinds of law enforcement officers, police, and of course the detectives in the police department, parole officers, corrections officers are law enforcement officers. Corrections people will work in jail and in prisons. Francesca says, my son is thinking about being an officer. We'll surely learn from this. Well, very good. Thank you. And I'm going to suggest you buy my book. My book, for those of you who haven't been watching me go on and on and on for the last 3 days, my book contains some 80 odd different stories, experiences I had on the street, in the detention facilities, in prison, and in court, because these are all places that I frequent as a probation officer. Now, let me just stick with probation for a moment and further confuse you, okay? There is adult probation and there is juvenile probation. Now, here's the thing. A person under age 8 in most states can't be held responsible for a criminal offense. In other words, can't be found guilty of. Now, the parents may find themselves in court or, whatever. If you're under age 8, you're not going to be held responsible for violating criminal law. But if you're age 8 and over, and in Arizona up to age 18, you are considered a juvenile and subject to a section of the trial court system called juvenile court. Now, just to make it a little more confusing for y'all, a juvenile can be tried as an adult at any age.
Okay.
John says he's surprised the system is actually quite complicated. Oh, let me tell you. I got to tell you, this was the most wonderful career I could possibly have had in my lifetime. I thoroughly enjoyed it. When I retired and they did their retirement ceremony on me, I had to tell the presiding judge that there were not even six occasions in 32 years when I wondered if I should really be carrying this badge or not. I totally loved it. In any event, if a person is a juvenile, but the offense is so serious and the person's mental and physical condition and whatnot is such that there is no way that the juvenile justice system is going to be able to provide appropriate services and the community needs to be protected, that person can be tried and found guilty as an adult. Now, the youngest one that, in my experience, that I saw was 12 years of age. Now, he had already left a juvenile correction agency, in other words, a juvenile state prison, and he was still very, very violent, and he committed some really heinous crimes. And yep, at age 12, he went to state prison. Adults, of course, work with adults only, except for the juveniles that have been found guilty as an adult. Here's the thing. You have got to be found guilty of a criminal offense before somebody like me takes an interest in your life and your background and what's going on with you. Okay. Cassandra says, what can you say about the younger delinquents being treated similarly to adult offenders? Do you think it's going to be more harmful for them? It can be. It can be. And let me tell you, if you're really interested in working probation work, I recommend juvenile work because juveniles are far, in my opinion, they're far more likely to be effectively worked with than our adult offenders. Now, that's my own prejudice. That's my own bias. But if you're being tried as an adult and you're still a juvenile, it means that the community has to be thought of first. The community has to be protected. And it may be that there's going to be a way to work with you and get you to change your behavior, get you to change your thought processes, but it's going to have to be done in a state prison where the community is being safely taken care of. I hope that at least kind of makes sense.
Can I interject something here real quick?
Yeah.
What I saw in just a few years that I had any involvement in this of his job or seeing his job, I saw that the kids, the young boys, because he was so good to them and created such a strong structure for them, that they had such highly respect for the most part, and were willing to listen to Carl, and they called him Captain Compassion. They were willing to listen and try to improve themselves. And that's what I got out of it.
I have seen juvenile offenders on my caseload, and my career was around juvenile. Joyce says book can be very beneficial, especially those rookie officers. Yes, and that is one of the reasons why I really would like to find ways to promote my book to various colleges and universities that have criminal justice classes. I would have I would have spent $50 or more, which is kind of cheap at a book in college, but I would have spent a lot to have a book that will tell me not only what my job is, what I do, but what my experiences are going to be under certain circumstances.
Were you able to read that one?
Henrietta says, if you're looking for a sneak peek behind the scenes of what it's like inside a policeman's work, then, well, thank you. She's saying this is a good book. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I would have loved to have had a book like this handed to me or required for my reading when I was in college, even in graduate school. I should mention, as a matter of fact, that in most states, including my state, Arizona, in order to be a probation officer, you need to not only have a good background around that, you need to have a minimum of a bachelor's degree in other words, a 4-year degree in a related field. Now, that isn't always going to be true for everybody that's going to work juvenile. In my state, 2 years of college or an associate's degree is required for working in detention. The juvenile justice system is really very, very serious about working with juvenile offenders and who's going to be working with juvenile offenders. What kinds of offenders are there out there? Well, let's see, Cassandra says she thinks that deserving juveniles, while they may be deserving of punishments, they should be treated with compassion. They're still developing. Yeah, I've read many times, I've been told many times in lectures that the human brain isn't completely matured and completely fixed up until you're about 25. Maybe that's why the Marine Corps was so willing to get me when I was 17. But I was 3 weeks past my 17th birthday when I went into the Marine Corps. Now that I've said that, I'll say that was thanks to a combination of two people important in my life working together. That's my mother and a juvenile court judge. And that was when I was 16. So when I turned 17, I found myself in the Marine Corps. And I'm going to tell you that even though the Marine Corps is a military organization, a combat organization, they saved my life. They changed my perspective in so many things and my way of doing in so many ways. And between that and my martial arts background, I at least kept myself out of trouble. Sophie says, thank you for this experience, how the system actually works. Again, I have about 80 stories about that, including stories. I did about 12 years in a inner city unit that dealt primarily where I dealt primarily with gangs and gangster moves. And back in the late 70s and early 80s, our job was to completely eradicate gangs from our community on a permanent basis, so that if you're watching this and you're a member of one of the current gangs in Phoenix, no, you don't. Yeah, you don't exist because I eradicated you. Tom Ross says, I'm guessing most prison systems veer more toward harsher treatments, but there are also other countries that treat these as more of a rehabilitation opportunity. What works better?
Oh boy,
Oh my.
that's a hard one.
Well, the first issue for me, when I'm dealing with an offender and I'm getting into a pre-sentence investigation, or when I'm working with an offender who is on probation and on my caseload, is that person willing to change? That's easy to talk about, like, well, you can stop drinking. All you got to do is not uncork the bottle. Yeah, it's easy to say. But if a person is an alcoholic, it's not easy to do. It can be the same thing with juveniles. Now all juveniles have families that have criminal backgrounds, but not all juveniles are trained and impressed and fashioned by their parents only. Schools, peers, neighborhoods, everything is impressing that person. And here's one of the pitfalls. Boy, I'm just going off to one side all the time. But here's one of the pitfalls of for a youngster or an adult on probation. You're going back into the same community you were in when you broke the law. And it's the same thing when a person is released on parole. They're going back, or possibly going back to their original community. That can really, really put an anchor on.
Harriet says.
Henrietta says, have you encountered prisoners who seem to have changed and were released and fell back into wrongful patterns oneself? Oh, sure. And I'm going to assure you that if you're in a jail or prison, if you're an inmate in a jail or in a prison, there's going to be a game that you're going to need to play in order to get along with everybody. And that gang, there's several aspects to the game. Game. One of them is, well, actually, I was not guilty. I was innocent, but I was framed. Okay, everybody that's convicted of criminal offenses is actually not guilty according to that game. And the other is, yeah, I'm sure working on change. Yes, sir, I'm going to do everything that they tell me on the street to do. Oh, I'm going to break the law. I'm going to get a job, yada, 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 yada. And they don't. That is some people. You're going to see that more commonly in adult than in juvenile. Actually, it also depends on the nature, and this goes back to that question. It goes back to the nature of the institution that person is going to. So that in the case of juveniles, for sure, a lot of times the individual offender, the juvenile, needs to be removed from the neighborhood, needs to be removed from the home, but doesn't necessarily need a highly confined, locked up thing from the State Department of Corrections. So that there are residential placements, boys' ranches and girls' ranches, kinds of things, if you will, that the state will put up money to house the kid in for. Could be 6 months, could be a year, could be a longer period of time if necessary. And that facility, that residential treatment center, is hopefully going to be able to really get into the offender, into their minds, into their hearts, and get them to want to change. My general bias is that when that happens, and it really does happen, when that happens, don't put that kid back into the same neighborhood again, because the kid's going to have to be able to get along with the family, with the neighbors, with the gangsters that he was formerly with. Naomi says, speaking of gangs, can you discuss how prisoners form groups inside? And why do they do this? Well, there are going to be several reasons why they're going to form groups in a prison. One of them is survival. That's why there are Black groups and white groups and Hispanic groups and whatnot. And they really will look for ways to ensure safety for themselves when they're in the joint, because that is not a friendly place. Hollywood aside, a prison is a very dangerous place to be in. And that's true for the corrections officer as well as the inmates. Okay. So that if our corrections systems had as a primary goal really rehabilitation, whatever that means, then yeah, they have to be pressing this on the individual offender a lot. Do they have the staff? Do they have the money? Do they have the time? Do they have the schools? Nope.
That's a good question.
Elizabeth says a probation officer can also be viewed as a parole officer, but I believe those two are different. Yeah, and I've been talking about that, Elizabeth. Yes, a probation officer is an officer of the court, works for the state court system, is a law enforcement officer working working for the community and working with people who could have been placed in prison but are not. They're allowed back on the streets with good behavior, while a parole officer works with people who have been imprisoned and are released before the termination of their sentence. So that if you had like 23 to life, and after 23 years, your behavior has been good enough that they decide, well, we don't need to have you in here anymore. We're overcrowded anyway. They'll let you out on parole if you promise to be a good person. But at the same time, you're going to be supervised by a corrections officer on the street who is called a parole officer. Wow, where am I at now?
You've got 4 minutes.
I've got 4 minutes. Okay. Law enforcement today is running a hard path. These last several years have been really hard on everybody in every community, and we don't have the those of us who have a badge really don't have the shiny saint-like surface that I think we had 25, 30 years ago. The issue is training, and that's what got me into trouble during my after about I had about 7 years to go in my career, and I was constantly complaining to the administrations. There are people in the detention facility, are people on the street. We all need more training. We need to be made more aware of what's available in the community and what we can and can't do. We need to have, and now I'm talking about when I was talking to the administrators, I was talking about detention officers. Good grief, we hire people who have 2 years of college. We even have actual public school systems in our detention facilities. And we're not using it all that well. We need to have a training academy. And one day, a assistant chief contacted me and said, well, do you really think that it's possible to create a detention officers academy for juvenile? I said, sure. And he said, fine, you've got 90 days. Write it up and get it started. And there I was with a big mouth, but not all those many ideas. Fortunately, I had people with me, other probation officers who shared the same views, who really helped me get an academy together. And I was able to operate in my last 6 or 7 years in my 32-year career, talking about these very things to new staff in the detention center.
You have 1 minute, dear.
Okay, we need,
Okay, Cassandra has a.
Cassandra says, what I'm getting from this is that system should work on separating these offenders to ensure their treatments is more beneficial for them. But unfortunately, the system we have now just throws them back into the, yeah, that is so commonly true. Lord, we need more money. We need more staff. We need more training, not just we probation, we police, corrections facilities.
Yeah.
Years ago, our prison systems had classes in skills. You could learn to be a plumber. You could learn to be an auto mechanic. You could learn to be many, many, many things. And this was shut down.
I hate to say it, dear. Your time is up.
All right, time is up. I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you for listening.